Please take the chair by the service corridor, the bride said, her smile sugar-sweet and perfectly rehearsed. A string quartet threaded a slow melody through the ballroom while waiters floated past in black vests. Crystal caught the light. Every surface gleamed as if the room had been polished to impress a camera more than a person. I stood beside the gift table with a small white box tied in silver ribbon resting under my palm. My name is Evelyn Hart. I'm 59, a widow, and the mother of the groom, Noah Hart, who was across the dance floor laughing at something his best man had whispered. He didn't see me. He didn't hear the bride Camille Rhodes, now my daughter-in-law, lean close, so only I would catch the words meant to disappear into the music. Closer to the kitchen, she murmured, eyes bright. The photos will read, cleaner without older guests up front. The sentence landed softly and cut anyway. Around our table, a four covered. Someone cleared a throat and two cousins pretended to study the centerpieces. Only Mara Jensen, Noah's godmother, and my oldest friend met my eyes. Her look said, I don't accept this. Mine answered, don't fight for me here. I smoothed the skirt of the navy dress I'd saved for months to buy the nicest thing in my closet. Then I smiled the kind of smile that holds. I lifted the white box from the linen, tucked it against my ribs, and walked. The floor was marble and unforgiving. My heels marked a quiet metronome as I passed the head table. Noah adjusted his cufflink, still laughing. A photographer crouched for a candid of the bridesmaids. Glass chimed somewhere to my left. A waiter pulled a door with his elbow so I could slip through. Conversations blurred into a hush that followed me to the hallway and died there. Outside, the evening air was clean and a few degrees kinder. I stood beneath a row of lanterns and let my breath even out. It would have been easy to pretend nothing had happened. It would have been easier still to obey, take the chair by the swinging door, and edit myself out of their pictures. The box felt light, but it carried weight. Inside was not a toaster or a set of wine glasses. Inside was a property deed to a waterfront penthouse appraised at $3.1 million and a cashier's check for $4 million, my gift to Noah and Camille. I had imagined handing it to them after the toast, imagined the room going very quiet for once, imagined my son's face turning boyish with surprise. I had even pictured the bride's careful smile softening into something like gratitude. I looked down at the ribbon catching the lamplight and understood that the gift no longer matched the room I had just left. The instruction to sit by the kitchen wasn't a mishap of logistics. It was a message about who counts and who decorates the edges. If I gave this box now, I would be confirming their measure of me. A taxi idled at the curb. The driver glanced at the box, then at my face in the mirror. You all right, ma'am? I'm better than I was 10 minutes ago, I said, and gave him my address. As the car slid into traffic, the venue receded to a glittering rectangle in the side window. I thought of how often mothers are expected to be invisible until a bill needs paying. How easily love gets translated into access. How quickly respect is traded for a seat near a door. At a red light, the driver tapped the steering wheel with two fingers to the rhythm on the radio. I set the box on my lap and pressed my palm to the lid. There would be phone calls later. Explanations would be requested and perhaps invented if I declined to offer them. But explanations are not the same as apologies, and proximity is not the same as care. When we reached my building, I stepped out and stood a moment with the city climbing the night above me. I carried the white box inside and felt something steady settle in my chest. I had come to the wedding prepared to give them a future. Instead, I kept the gift, and with it kept myself. The quartet would keep playing. The cameras would keep flashing. The pictures would be pristine. In none of them would I be standing near a kitchen door. Back in my apartment, the city hummed through the thin windows like a memory I could not quite place. I set the white box on the kitchen table and turned on the lamp with the crooked shade. The bulb took its time to glow the way older things do. I boiled water, rinsed a mug that had a faint hairline crack at the rim, and stood waiting for the kettle's small complaint. The dress pinched at the waist where I'd let it out myself with uneven stitches. I could have changed, but I kept it on as if the fabric could testify that I'd been somewhere bright and had chosen the dark on purpose. There is a chair in the corner of my living room that people apologize to when they sit in it as if they might hurt a relic. It belonged to my husband, Arthur Hart Art, when he grinned Arthur in every other register. The varnish is worn smooth on the arms where his hands rested for years after shifts that turned his fingers gray with metal dust. When he died, I sold almost everything that could be sold without handing away our history. The chair stayed. It still holds the echo of his posture and the faint scent of a wood polish we could afford once a season if we skipped eating out. I pulled the chair away from the wall and sat. The apartment clicked and sighed around me, a chorus of old pipe noises and the refrigerator's stubborn engine. I set the mug on the low table Arthur built from a salvaged door, the paint flaking in layers like pages of a book. The box waited on the kitchen table, too bright for this room. I left it there so it wouldn't start rewriting my past from the corner. After Arthur died, I learned to keep a small ledger. Nothing elegant spiral notebook, ruled paper, the cheapest pen the drugstore sold in a pack of 10. Rent, utilities, prescriptions, bus fare, groceries. I wrote everything down because numbers can puzzle you if you blink too slowly. I learned how to weigh apples by the thought of them rather than the pound. I learned which cashier would let me put back a carton of eggs without announcing it to the line. I learned that when people say, "It all adds up," they mean it lifts like a tide and suddenly the floor of your life is underwater. That season hardened something and softened something else. I became fluent in patience and in the shame that stands beside it, clearing its throat. I also became precise. Precision is a quiet weapon. It turns fear into lines that can be read. The day I bought the lottery ticket, I had 4 crumpled singles and a handful of coins in my coat pocket. Mara Jensen had invited me to a brunch Camille insisted on, a bridal warm-up Camille called it, as if compassion could be rehearsed. The cafe was all plate glass and pale wood, and waiters with tattoos that meant something in languages I didn't speak. I ordered the least expensive thing on the menu, toast, and told myself I wasn't hungry. Camille arrived in a white sweater the color of expensive milk and talked about a handbag she just had to have, tapping her phone to show us its price as if numbers were a sport. On my way home, I ducked into a corner store to buy tea bags, 6 in a paper envelope, and the clerk announced that the jackpot had climbed to 58 million. He said it to the room in general, and the room did what rooms do. Nobody answered. I was not the sort of person who believed in lightning choosing me. I am the sort of person who carries a folded grocery list into a store and leaves with exactly what's on it. But a stubbornness rose not against the math, but against the story that money only belongs to people who already have a word for it that doesn't bruise their mouth. "Give me 1, I said, and slid a 5 across the counter. I picked my numbers by an odd superstition of dates and bus routes, 316, 28, 42, 49, and Powerball 12. I tucked the ticket behind a library card I keep because it looks like hope. Then I forgot it. Hope doesn't ask for notice. It bides its time. 2 days later, I watched the drawing on a television with a picture that flickered if anyone in the building flushed. The numbers arrived the way footsteps arrive down a hall you've lived in forever, known and still surprising. I read them once, twice, a third time. It felt like someone had pressed pause on the room. My first thought was not joy. It was logistics, then fear, then a very practical thought. You will need a lawyer. Mara, who knows where all the good information hides, gave me 3 names in an email with no subject line. I chose the one who answered his own phone. Mr. Calder was the kind of attorney you hope you get in a small crisis, calm, tired about the right things, and allergic to grandstanding. His office was above a florist that could turn grief into centerpieces in an hour. He pushed a cup of coffee toward me that tasted like the inside of a thermos, and he said almost lightly, "Congratulations. Now don't tell anyone. I have a son," I said, "and he's getting married. Especially don't tell anyone," he repeated, and the light tone fell away. "We'll build a trust. We'll decide what you want to happen if you're tired, sick, angry, or generous. We'll do it in ink. Let paper be the lever, not the conversation." He made me read things out loud. I'm not sure if it was a test or a kindness. When my voice stumbled on legalese, he translated into ordinary language. When I asked if it was wrong to keep a secret this large from family, he said what I paid him to say. A secret is a story with a schedule. We're setting the schedule. When the accounts were arranged and the shell of the trust heart key stood on paper, he asked what I wanted to do. Not in some vague philanthropic future, now. "I want to take care of my son," I said. The words had grooves in them from years of use. "And I want to be seen when I do." He didn't smile. He wrote something on a yellow pad and tore the sheet off very carefully. "Being seen is not a legal instrument," he said, "but it belongs in the plan. How will you know if the plan is working?" "I'll know if my presence matters even when I'm not paying for the picture," I said a little louder than I meant to. "Then we'll protect your ability to say no," he said. "Everything else we can buy." The penthouse happened because I made the mistake of walking through it. The real estate agent had that flossy hair women acquire through either money or miracle, I can never tell which. She said the words "private elevator and waterline view" with a cadence meant to hypnotize. We stepped through glass doors into a blue so big it silenced me. Water has a way of convincing you your life might be wider than you've allowed it to be. I told myself I was buying it for Noah and Camille, that I would wrap the deed in tissue paper printed with a compass motif, that they would step into that foyer and breathe differently for the rest of their marriage. I told myself I was buying it with gratitude for the years when all we had was a 1-bedroom and fun was measured by the library's air conditioning. I told myself a lot of things. Some were true. I closed with a pen that made a nice sound on thick paper. At the bank, I signed for a cashier's check in an amount that could erase mistakes whole cities are built on. The bank manager, all expensive watch and best behavior, asked me to confirm the number twice, and I did. My hand shook anyway, the way an engine shivers when it idles. At home, I bought the white box from a craft store because I wanted the moment to look the way it felt in my head. Clean, ceremonial, a hinge in a life. I lifted the tissue paper and laid in the deed, then the check in a velvet sleeve the color of a night sky that never threatens rain. I pressed the lid until it fit with a soft friction that sounded to me like a promise being kept. In the weeks before the wedding, I contributed to things that go fast and our forgotten extra arrangements for the corner where photographs happen a second dessert, because Camille liked the word abundance, a last-minute upgrade for the trio, because someone said a string quartet meant more elegant memories. Those charges went on the ledger under a column I labeled, "This is what mothers do." I ate broth and crackers and told myself I felt lighter. Lighter is a lie with a nice dress on. I also bought a dress for myself, the navy one, with a waist that insisted on posture, and a neckline that didn't apologize. When it arrived, I hung it where I could see it every time I boiled water, a small flag of belonging. I rehearsed what I would say when I gave them the box. I learned the words by heart. You can always tell when someone speaks by heart. The sentence carries their breath like a sail. I imagine it's possible to walk into a wedding without any past clinging to you. I have never met that person. I carried Arthur down the aisle with me. I carried the flu night when Noah was 8 and burned so hot I prayed out loud to an empty room. I carried the drag of bus steps on my knees and the weight of coins on a counter where the clerk doesn't look up. And I carried not least a stubborn confidence that gratitude could be taught to people who were raised on praise. The ceremony was as lovely as money can make it. I chose a seat in the middle, not the front row Camille had pre-assigned for immediate family, because I no longer knew what those two words meant in that room. When Noah turned to watch her walk toward him, his face softened into a shape I recognized from his kindergarten pictures. I let that sight warm me like a lamp. I clapped when the clapping started. I said the response when the minister nodded at the congregation. I cried because crying is cheaper than regret and washes out more easily. At the reception, the quartet tuned in the corner and the lighting did that pleasant trick of pretending everyone sleeps 8 hours a night and drinks water between glasses of champagne. I found my name on a card at table 14 and my body in a chair that hurt my lower back if I crossed my legs. The white box sat where I could touch it without looking like a guard. You already know what happened next because I told you in another shape. Camille leaned with her smile and made me smaller with 6 words. By the service corridor would be best. She said it the way you might say, "Yellow roses not red, a preference disguised as mercy." I will tell you a thing I learned in that moment. There are some sentences that are too efficient to argue with. You meet them and you realize that the argument isn't about content, it's about value. And value is not settled with a speech. So I stood, I lifted the box, I left. Outside, the air was 4 degrees more humid, and the lanterns were honest about how little light they gave. In the taxi, I felt the muscle in my jaw unclench 1 notch with each passing block. By the time I reached my building, I had decided to keep the gift. It was as simple as that. People think life turns on trumpets. Sometimes it turns on a small click inside your ribcage. The phone began its performance at 1:07 a.m. First Noah, "Are you okay?" Then Camille. "We think there's been a misunderstanding." Misunderstanding is such a useful word. It lays its coat over the puddle you dug. I let them ring. I am not a cruel woman, but I am not a door the world can practice on anymore. Morning made the kitchen ordinary again. The box sat where I'd left it. The ribbon caught the light and made a small silver line across the lid. I brewed tea and called Mr. Calder because I have learned that feelings travel better when they've been secured in writing. "Are you rescinding a gift?" he asked, voice as neutral as a wall. "I'm preserving one," I said. "For now." "Good," he said. A for now costs less to reverse than a forever. He offered to send language, small, precise sentences that said what they needed to say and nothing else. He reminded me where the emergency folder was in case anyone decided to be persuasive in person. He told me with gentle verve that a lock is a tool, not a confession. I glanced at Arthur's chair and felt for the first time in a long time like I was sitting with someone rather than instead of someone. Memory can be a crowd if you let it. It can also be one hand in the small of your back steadying you as you step off a curb you're not sure about. That afternoon, I walked to the waterfront. The pier board sounded hollow, a drum underfoot. The gulls held a meeting that had nothing to do with me. A boy tried to convince a dog to accept a life jacket, and the dog had a detailed counter-argument. I stood with the wind and practiced a sentence. I love my son and I love myself. Those two facts are not enemies. It was important to hear it out loud. It is easy for women of my generation to let one of those halves starve politely. On the way home, I passed a window where they sell wedding dresses in a shade of white that looks like it would stain if you exhaled. A young woman stood in front of the glass with her mother. They were arguing in low voices that were really a duet. I didn't make a metaphor out of them. Not everything has to serve your story. I kept walking. Back at my kitchen table, I opened my ledger and started a new page. Not the usual columns, just a title, Promises I'm Willing to Keep. I wrote 3 lines. I keep my own company gently. I do not pay for access to the people who say they love me. I will not confuse silence with consent or noise with care. The phone lit up and went dark. The white box sat steady as a small moon. I thought of the conversation I'd planned to have when I handed it over. How I would thank them for including me. How I would tell them I believed in their beginning. How I would ask discreetly to be allowed to belong on ordinary Tuesdays, not just holidays that require photography. What a tiny ask when you say it that way. What a large ask in rooms that grade affection like a performance. Toward evening, Mara knocked with grocery store tulips and a look that said, "Do you want words or soup?" I wanted both. We ate on the couch with our knees touching, and we did not mention Camille right away. We told old jokes, the kind that have sanded down punchlines because they've been in service too long. Later, I told her what had been said to me, and she did not yelp or swear on my behalf, though she's capable of both. She only set her bowl down and asked, "What do you want to do next?" "I want to keep the box," I said. "Then keep it," she said, as if the world were that straightforward. "And Evelyn, if you need me to say the rude part out loud in your hallway, you know I can." "I know," I said, "but not yet. Let me try a season without shouting." When she left, I washed the bowls and set them to dry, one slightly chipped, one intact. I imagined I could assign symbolism to that if I needed to. I decided not to need to. That night, I slept poorly, then well, then poorly again, as if each hour argued with the next. At about 3, I woke with the certainty that I should put the spare penthouse key. Yes, I had one somewhere less romantic than the velvet pouch it came in. I placed it in the lining of my purse and pricked my finger doing it. The drop of blood looked dramatic until I wiped it away and it became what it was, a dot. The next morning, I ironed the navy dress and hung it in the back of the closet with the honest clothes. Rituals matter. They teach your body what your mind has decided. I opened the white box and touched the edge of the deed without lifting it. Paper is not love, but it is proof, and sometimes proof is what lets love breathe. The calls that followed were inventive and varied. Camille's first apology sounded like a weather report for a city I don't live in. The second came wrapped in logistics. Could she stop by and lighten my load by picking up the gift to keep it safe while they opened presents for content? Noah's messages tried humor, then nostalgia, then the plain sentence, "We messed up, Mom." I answered softly where I could, not at all where I couldn't. You can't negotiate a wound while it's fresh. It makes everything sticky. When a number I didn't recognize texted to say there'd been a medical emergency and they needed my address for family consent, I did not panic. I called the hospital myself and confirmed that my son was not there. I sat at my crooked shaded lamp and wrote a new sentence in the ledger, "Urgency is not proof." By the end of that week, the apartment had stopped feeling like a waiting room and started feeling like a place where I live. That is a small sentence and a large shift. I put a cheap bouquet of daisies in a jam jar and told them as I trimmed the stems, "You are here to be beautiful, not to argue a point." The jar did its job, so did the flowers. I won't lie and tell you I didn't stand at the window and think about knocking on a different kind of door. The door of generosity that turns into permission. But I kept remembering Mr. Calder's other sentence, the one he said while staring at his pen as if pens could doubt. A boundary is not a performance. It's an operating instruction. It felt like the sort of sentence that doesn't trend online and saves lives quietly. On Sunday, I rode the bus to the waterfront again, not because I had a ritual to maintain, but because the light looked like it might forgive a week. I walked without assigning metaphors to gulls or waves. A child in a bright jacket chased bubbles that convinced him they were alive and teasing. I wished him a life full of such arguments. I returned home and made soup. I ate it in Arthur's chair with a napkin on my lap like a citizen. By then, Noah had sent a message that was almost right. "Mom, we need to talk in person, just me. No asks." Almost right isn't right enough when you're reteaching your life how to treat you. I told him tomorrow might work. He wrote back a heart like a teenager. Camille posted a photo of new luggage with a caption about stepping into our future, and I did not roll my eyes out loud. Self-control is a muscle. Mine is getting stronger. Before I went to bed, I moved the white box from the kitchen table to the top shelf of my closet. Not to hide it, but to put it where it wouldn't glare at me every time I drank tea. I slid my ledger underneath it. Promises above, proof below. It was late enough for the building to fall into that soft communal sleep you can feel through the walls. I turned out the lamp and let the room dim to the kind of dark that tells the truth you are held. You are alone, you are not required to make everyone else comfortable. I slept. Morning arrived with a thin line of light across the floor, like someone had used a ruler on the sun. I made tea in Arthur's mug, the one with the chipped handle. We called it the brave one and sat to consider the day. I didn't feel triumphant. That's a costume you can't wear all day without it chafing. I felt capable. Capability is modest and rare and often mistaken for luck when seen from a distance. If you're waiting for fireworks, I'm sorry. In my experience, real turning points have paperwork attached. I had the paperwork, I had the turn. The rest would arrive on foot. And in that perfectly ordinary morning, with the box put away and my breath unhurried, I understood the most expensive lesson I've ever learned for free. I can love my child without paying for my place in his life. The math works. It just uses different numbers than the world prefers. I rinsed the mug, straightened the chair, and dressed in a sweater that did not apologize for existing. When the phone rang, I let it say my name and returned to itself. The white box did not move on its shelf, not a test, not a bribe, just mine, until respect learns where to knock. And that, quiet as a lock catching, is where the next part of my story begins. Morning came with a seam of light across the floor, narrow and exact. I brewed tea, slid the white box to the top shelf of the closet, and let the room breathe without it. On the table, I opened my spiral ledger to a fresh page and wrote a title that felt like a dare to myself. What's true, what's noise? Before the kettle clicked, the phone buzzed. Noah, Mom, can we talk today? Just me, no agenda. Almost right isn't right enough when you're rebuilding a life. I typed, tomorrow maybe. No requests, no photos, no surprises. He sent back a heart and I got it. The heart landed like a balloon against a ceiling it could not lift. I called Mr. Calder. He answered on the second ring, voice steady as a ruler. 2 things I said. I'm keeping the gift, and I'm tired of guessing. Good, he replied. When people want your money, they teach you to doubt your eyesight. Let's teach your eyesight to argue back. He gave me a name, Rebecca Shaw, licensed investigator, discreet by design, and a time. She's the kind who documents before she theorizes, he said. You want that. Rebecca's office sat above a locksmith and beside a shop that only sold screws in little labeled drawers. The hallway carpet had the particular fade of a place that lets sunlight in, but never entertains it. She was smaller than her reputation on the phone had made her, with a notepad already open and a pen that did not squeak. What do you want to know? She asked after I finished the short version of the wedding and the long version of the years before it. Enough to decide clean, I said. Debts, habits, plans, whether handing over that box would save a marriage or just feed an appetite. She nodded once. 2 weeks, she said. Likely less. I'll bring paper. It took 6 days. On the 7th, she laid a binder on her desk like a polite verdict. Tabs marched down the edge, credit loans, purchases, public, professional contact attempts. She turned to the first. 3 credit cards near limit, she said, tapping a column of balances with interest rates that strained the page. A store account tied to a luxury handbag chain, minimums met, principal barely touched. Buy now, pay later on home goods, clothing, electronics. 6 open lines, all alive. I felt something tilt in my chest and right itself. She flipped the tab. Auto loan. 6 months ago, she traded for a higher-end SUV. Payment could feed a small town if you let it. Another tab. Honeymoon package financed. Deposits made with promotional visas that come with strings. She slid a photo across the desk. Camille in a boutique holding a purse like an award, the price tag doing its own speech. Another image, Noah outside a financial planning office sign on the door promising legacy strategies. Rebecca didn't glance at me when she said, they asked about timelines for inheritance and how to set up power of attorney for an elderly parent. The receptionist wouldn't disclose details. I was a prospective client with questions. Air thinned. I pressed my palms together under the desk, felt the line of my lifeline and how unromantic it looked when it did its job. Rebecca kept to the notes. There's also this. She slid a card across the wood, Jake Morrell Investigations. They hired someone too. He shadowed you at Calder's office and outside a title company. No access to sealed files, just photographs. He watched your bank on 2 mornings. She turned a glossy print toward me, my face stiff and tired, the bank's envelope under my arm like a lifeline I didn't want to admit I needed. He's building a story to sell to them, Rebecca said. Or to scare you into clarifying. Nothing illegal, but it maps intent. The last tab was labeled public. Rebecca skimmed. Her captions are about leveling up and family backing. His replies are keys and flexed biceps. Symbols are sometimes more honest than paragraphs. She shut the binder. You are not their plan, she said, voice even. You are their bailout. There are sentences that arrive like weather and sentences that arrive like blueprints. That one did both. I paid her, thanked her, and stepped into a street that carried me like a moving sidewalk back to an apartment that had one good chair and one good rule: you don't have to hurry every hard thing. I made tea, opened my ledger to a new page, and wrote a line in neat block letters. Paper is the antidote to panic. Then I listed the facts: debts, purchases, inquiries. the man they hired to follow me. Under that, I wrote, "What I owe nothing, not even a speech." That afternoon, Camille called. Her voice arrived sugared and brisk. "Evelyn, hi. Yesterday was chaotic. The photographer insisted on certain angles. When I said kitchen corridor, I meant composition, not, well, age or anything." She laughed softly, the sort that asks you to pity the confusion of geniuses. "We're opening gifts today at noon," she added in one breath. "It would mean so much if yours was there. We can send a driver. No need for you to carry anything heavy." It's a curious thing to feel yourself become suddenly fluent in a language you've only ever overheard. I was now fluent in access. "No thank you," I said. "Is this about optics?" she asked. "I can fix optics." "It's about respect," I said. "Only you can fix that." Silence, the confused kind, not the listening kind, drifted down the line. She tried again later with a different weather system. "Could you at least tell me what to tell people? Your absence looks bad." I let the call end itself. By evening, an unknown number lit the screen. I answered because sometimes you have to let a trick reveal its hands. A male voice, urgent and breathy. "Miss Hart. There's been an emergency. Your son collapsed at work. We're with a private ambulance service. The hospital needs a family signature by proxy. Could you text your address?" "What hospital?" I asked. "A beat, county." "Which unit?" "Emergency." The word came out dressed wrong like a borrowed suit. "I'll call them," I said, and hung up. County had no record of him, no incoming transfer, no unknown male of his age. I set the phone down and wrote a new heading in the ledger, "Emergencies real, manufactured." Under real, I wrote Arthur's last night, Noah's fever at 8, the landlord's burst pipe. Under manufactured, I wrote wedding photos. Midnight misunderstandings, phantom ambulance. I drew a line under the second column and across it wrote urgency proof. The next morning, the concierge called from downstairs. "Miss Hart, Mr. Hart, and Mrs. Rhodes are in the lobby. Please tell them I'm not receiving visitors," I said. The words were awkward in my mouth the way a new shoe is the first hour. He hesitated. "They're asking nicely." "Water is available," I said. "They're welcome to wait. They're hoping you'll come down." "I won't," I replied and thanked him for the call. The phone vibrated. "We're downstairs, please. 5 minutes. We want to apologize in person." I rested my hand against the deadbolt and felt the pulse there. The hallway was quiet, weak and quiet, woolen and thick. My door did not move. At 11, Mara arrived with a brown bag and the practical face she keeps for triage. "Soup," she announced, "the kind that mends a day." We ate at the counter, the steam writing friendly sentences against the window. "They hired a man to follow me," I said when the bowls were empty. Mara's jaw worked once. "So we're done with polite grammar," she said. "Fine by me." "I'm not opening the door," I said. "Fine by me twice," she said. "Do you want me to go downstairs and misplace an apology on their shoes?" I smiled. "No," I said. "I want quiet. I want to practice not negotiating with my own decisions." Mara washed the bowls as if they belonged to her because they did, in the way some friends claim spoons without asking. Before she left, she looked at the closet shelf where the white box sat like a small moon. "If you ever decide to give it," she said, "make sure it's not the key to your own cage." In the afternoon, Noah called from a number I recognized. I let it ring once and answered because I wanted to be the one who chose when the talking happened. "Mom," he said, words trying to find a lane. "We messed up. I didn't see what happened at the table. I should have. I'm sorry." "I believe you didn't see," I said. "I also believe what's seen and what's permitted tend to shake hands. I want to fix it." "So do I said, "but not with a retake and not with a deposit." He swallowed. "You can hear a swallow if you're sitting still enough. Can I come up, just me?" "Not today," I said. "Start with a week where you call me without a request in your pocket. Start with a sentence that doesn't spend me." There was no slam, no plea. "Okay," he said, and the boy I raised briefly surfaced in the man he is, okay? That night, I sat in Arthur's chair with a ledger and a pen that writes like a good violin, no squeal, just line. I made a short list titled Operating Instructions and numbered them because numbers fight drift. Answer slowly. Verify separately. Decline without a speech. Keep receipts for yourself, not for court. Move toward what steadies you. On the next page, I wrote another thing I didn't plan to write next address. Under it, call the movers. Ask Mr. Calder to confirm utilities. Tell the concierge the date. The thought settled like furniture. I had purchased a future and left it in tissue. Perhaps it was time to move into it myself. The following day, I walked to the building by the water with a small notebook and a larger calm. The property manager remembered me and did not pretend otherwise. We confirmed the freight elevator, the loading window, the parking clearance for a truck that would carry a life so small it could be counted in 7 boxes in one chair. "Thursday," he asked. "Thursday," I said and felt the word find a landing. Back home, I took books from the shelf and wrapped them in brown paper I had saved from years of deliveries, proof that patience collects as quietly as dust. I labeled each bundle with a dull pencil kitchen bath misc. Chair. The last label made me laugh, as if the chair could be anywhere but near the window. The phone worked at its job. "Can we talk? Have you eaten? I can explain." I let nearly all of it pass me like small weather fronts. In the evening, a longer message came from Camille, a kind of prose poem to optics. "If you don't clarify, people will think badly of us." She wanted me to say I'd been faint, that the dress pinched, that I needed air. "I will not lie for your comfort." I texted back and put the phone in the drawer with the rubber bands and the takeout menus from a life that mostly made its own food. On Wednesday, Rebecca called. "One more thing," she said. "They're liquidating a small investment account. Fees and taxes will eat more than the gain. The timing suggests urgency." "Thank you," I said. "You've given me the one gift I couldn't buy, clarity." "Clarity is cheaper than you think," she said. "It just charges all at once." I slept with the window cracked and the city practicing lullabies that only apartment people know. Elevator cables, someone reheating leftovers, a child, convincing sleep it was a rumor. My dreams did not drag me back into rooms where I had to explain a boundary. In the morning, I folded the navy dress and placed it on a high shelf, not a costume anymore, just cloth. By noon, movers had confirmed. Mr. Calder had sent a neat list of switchovers, electric, water mail, hold internet. I told the concierge my date and asked him not to accept packages from names I didn't recognize. He wrote it on actual paper, which felt like respect you can photocopy. I made soup because soup turns a day into a verb you can do slowly. While it simmered, I opened a cheap notebook and wrote harbor things at the top, a private joke about the view and the city, and the fact that I was learning late how to make my own weather. I listed what the new place would need: 2 sets of sheets, a kettle that doesn't rattle, a long-handled duster, 3 houseplants that forgive forgetful people. At the bottom, on a line by itself, I wrote, "Guests who knock right." In the late afternoon, the building's desk called again, more careful than before. "Miss Hart," the concierge said, "they're back. Please tell them what you told them last time," I said. There was a pause. "They brought a gift bag." "Then you have a bag to inventory," I said gently. "Thank you for the courtesy." After the call, I stood with my hand on the door palm against wood, feeling the cool through paint. I understood suddenly and without romance that doors are not morality plays. They are tools. Mine closed clean, mine opened on purpose, mine clicked when it needed to. When evening settled, I wrote one more list in the ledger: what I keep, what I don't. Keep my chair, my tea, my ledger, my son as a person when he shows up as a person. Don't keep debt that isn't mine, photographs that rehearse kindness instead of doing it, apologies that ask for a key. I set the pen down. In the quiet, I could almost hear a future moving its furniture into place upstairs. Not triumph, not revenge rooms that fit. On the closet shelf, the white box stayed where I'd put it, no longer a bribe, pressed into hope, not yet a bequest, simply an object that answered to me. At some point, I realized I was smiling the way people smile when they finally believe a simple sentence: "I'm allowed to do this." I washed the one bowl, dried it with a thin towel that never seems to learn its job, and hung it even so. The city dimmed its lamps by degrees. Somewhere a neighbor laughed. Somewhere a child argued the case for 5 more minutes. I put on a sweater that didn't apologize for being warm and stood at the window. Tomorrow there would be boxes and men in canvas gloves, a freight elevator, and a signature in a clipboard column labeled "Received." Tomorrow my chair would face water and learn a new posture. Tomorrow I would move into the space I had once wrapped for someone else. Tonight I practiced the smallest ceremony I know. I turned the deadbolt. It didn't sound dramatic. It sounded like an instrument tuned to itself. Moving day began with the hush buildings make when they agree to cooperate. The lobby smelled faintly of lemon oil and new carpet. The concierge greeted me by name as if we'd known each other longer than 3 conversations. Men in canvas gloves rolled my life onto the freight elevator. 7 boxes, a lamp with a dented shade, a crate of books wrapped in brown paper, and Arthur's chair held level like a fragile instrument. "Delicate?" the foreman asked. "Important," I said. He nodded as if those were synonyms. The elevator opened to a small private foyer. Beyond, the glass water threw light against the room like handfuls of coins. I signed the clipboard in the column marked "Received, tipped more than was expected because gratitude feels better when it moves," and watched the men set Arthur's chair by the largest window facing east. My shoulders lowered a fraction as if the room had agreed to carry its share. I walked the perimeter like a person learning the edges of a new word. The kitchen's stone counter kept its cool. The faucet ran clear on the second try. The washer purred with the smugness of a machine that has never seen a coin slot. In the hall closet, I slid the white box onto the top shelf, not to hide it, but to put it where it would not supervise me. Paper is power. It is also heavy when you ask it to govern your day. Downstairs, I gave the concierge 2 instructions on paper, which he accepted as if it were a treaty. No visitors without a call first, no packages accepted from names I didn't recognize. He wrote each line in blue ink. "Understood," he said, and that word fit. The phone began its duty before lunch. "Noah, I'm here with Camille. Can we come up?" "5 minutes, Mom." I let the screen lock itself. The intercom buzzed a polite doorbell with ambitions. I stepped to the door, but not the handle. "Miss Hart, the concierge, said over the hallway speaker, they're in the lobby. Please let them know I'm not receiving visitors," I answered. "Offer water." A few minutes later, the elevator chimed. I watched the numbers hesitate on my floor and then continue. Someone had taken pity. Pity is a ladder people borrow without asking. Knuckles tapped 3 soft knocks I recognized from Halloween's and Bad Dreams. "Mom," Noah said through the wood, "careful, it's just me." I rested my forehead against the frame and felt the cool. I could open. I could make it easy the way I have always made it easy, grease the hinge with an apology that isn't mine and call it grace. I stepped back instead. "When you're ready to visit me without an agenda," I said, calm as a measuring cup, "you'll know how to knock." Silence stood on the other side. Camille tried brightness. "We brought something for you." The handle shifted a fraction, curious, then stilled. I pressed the latch just enough for the mechanism to click the smallest sound a boundary makes when it remembers itself. "Start with truth," I said through the door, "not optics." Their footsteps receded, the elevator sighed. I let my hand fall from the lock and stayed where I was, noticing the steadiness in my chest as if it were a new appliance humming properly. That evening, Mara arrived with a paper bag that smelled like supper and strategy. She breezed past the threshold like she had a passport for my life. "Kitchen," she declared, and set out tomatoes, bread, cheese, and a jar of honey. "You slice. Thick." We don't whisper to a tomato. We cooked standing up, the pan snapping agreement. The grilled cheese went crisp at the edges. The soup decided to be generous. We ate at the island and measured the day in bites and exhalations. "I didn't open the door," I said. Mara raised her water glass. To that sentence, never needing fireworks. We talked small logistics, where to buy sheets that don't sulk, which plant forgives neglect, the address of a hardware store that sells courage disguised as screws. When the plates were rinsed and drying, I told her about the binder Rebecca had brought about the cards and loans and the detective shadowing me to the bank. Mara listened without the noises people make when they want credit for being outraged. She just let the facts stand upright. "What do you want to do with all that proof?" she asked. "Make sure it doesn't drown only me," I said, surprised at the sentence as it arrived. "I keep thinking about women my age being turned into wallets with recipes." Mara leaned on her elbows. "Then let paperwork for them too. Call Calder. Give the idea a spine." We named it before the tea finished steeping. Harbor Light Fund. Not clever, just right in the mouth. "Microgrants," I said, writing on a pad with hotel pen seriousness. Tiny fast checks that keep a utility on or a landlord honest. A clinic day for power of attorney and beneficiary designations. A hotline that rings where a human answers. "And rules," Mara added. "It needs rules so it doesn't drift into theater. Half of all donations out the door within 90 days, I said. No essays. 1 page. Trust first, verify as we go." Mara grinned like a coach who has watched a runner find her stride. "Tomorrow," she said. "Call Calder. Make the feeling into paper." When she left, I washed 2 mugs and set them upside down like little domes of peace. I moved Arthur's chair a thumb width toward the window until the view found his old armrests. I placed one of his paperbacks on the sill, spine facing the water, so the past would have something to read while the future learned its lines. Night arrived as a gradient harbor lamps, distant fairy horn, the glass going from mirror to dark. I stood at the balcony with the door a finger width ajar, letting the room and the air negotiate. A door like that is not indecision. It is an instrument tuned to weather. The next morning, Mr. Calder laid documents across a conference table that smelled faintly of toner and floor wax. "Articles, bylaws, bank," he said, tapping each stack with a pen. "Name?" he asked, though he already knew. "Harbor Light Fund," I said. He wrote it as if the letters had mass. "Mission," he prompted. I read what I'd drafted in my kitchen: emergency support and legal advocacy for older women facing financial coercion by family. He crossed out coercion and wrote pressure above it, then crossed that out and returned to coercion. "Say what it is," he muttered, approving his own edit. We set term limits, conflict of interest language, and a rule about no fundraising photos of distress. "Dignity doesn't need a lens," Calder said. He called a friend at a credit union. By lunch, an account existed with a balance that was serious without asking me to stop breathing. I signed where the flags told me to sign. The notary's seal made a dry, satisfying thud. "How does it feel?" Calder asked. "Like putting a roof on a house that kept pretending it loved the rain," I said. Back at the penthouse, I tucked a copy of the filings into the closet beside the white box mission next to money, each minding its lane. I wrote 3 lines on the refrigerator notepad: order kettle, buy sheets, call pastor about a room on Thursdays. Then below those, a 4th, tell Noah, I love him and I'm not a bank. The intercom buzzed once in the late afternoon. I ignored it without a speech. Instead, I texted my son a smaller invitation than all the ones I used to write. When you're ready to sit with me without asking for anything, I'll make soup. Not today. Soon. He replied, I'm trying. That present tense was enough for a day. As dusk slid through the glass, I brewed tea and carried it to Arthur's chair. The cup settled into my palms with the weight of something earned rather than won. Below, the harbor kept up its side of the agreement, honest tides, workboats announcing themselves gulls practicing their raspy hymns. On the shelf, the white box did not glow or accuse. It simply waited a boundary wrapped in paper. I said the sentence aloud because houses learn by echo. The door opens for respect. The air didn't crackle, nothing mystical obliged. It was just true in a room where truth now had furniture. I left the balcony a hand's breadth ajar and let the evening decide how much of itself to send in. Then I sat warm and ordinary and watched my life keep a promise to me. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story. I'll see you next time as we continue exploring more journeys and lessons together.